Hello gardening friends, and welcome to Armstrong Acres. We are located in Central Mass. We are zone 6A. And for a while now I've been wanting to start a YouTube channel to share with friends what's going on here at the homestead. And also because there are a lot of gardening channels on YouTube. Very few of them are from Zone 6, and the ones that are tend to be in the Midwest, or like I can think of Laura Garden Answer. She's in Oregon or Idaho, right on the line. Their weather is 100 degrees right now, so even though they're the same zone as we are, their gardening challenges are very different. And so I wanted a channel for us in 6A, in the East Coast New England area, to have our own channel. So I decided to bite the bullet. The date is June 1st, 2020. The garden is not perfect, but it is mostly planted, so I figured it would be a good time to start off with a tour, let you know what I'm up to, talk about some stuff that we've got going on, and just kind of give you a baseline for what you will be seeing. I love watching gardening videos. I love garden tours. I love to see what varieties of vegetables people are growing. And so that's what you're going to get from here. This garden has been a garden since the 1960s. Up until about 3 years ago, it was a traditional rototilled every year, 7 dust on everything, etc., etc. We took the spot over, and I've gradually been expanding it. Everything from, let me see, from this row over is new this year. The area in back is new this year. And so I'll talk to you about that. I'll start here and move north. This is a pile of wood chips that we had from stumps that we had on the property. We had them ground down. It was a huge pile. It did not go nearly as far as I thought it would. We used it to mulch the future raspberry bed. I mulched my herb garden, which I will show you in a later video. We mulched a flower bed and a couple of beds here in the garden, and that's it. So I quickly realized that I need more wood chips. This grassy area, not grassy, this leaf area was an experiment. We put all of our fall leaves down to kill the grass underneath so that eventually we could make more beds. So that was the plan. And then Corona hit. And so I wanted to do what I could to expand the garden ASAP. So this row right here, basically I threw down cardboard. I put about 4 inches of compost on it, and I planted potatoes. As you can see, they're poking through. I mulched them with leaves. I'm going to have to mulch them again with leaves. And my attitude was, this is an experiment. If it works, great. We have potatoes. If it doesn't work, then it didn't cost me anything. In here, my plan for this summer, like I said, was to just kill the grass so that eventually we could put beds in. And then I realized that that was a waste of space. So I brought in a couple bucketfuls of compost, and I have planted, right here you see some kashaw. We have some Cinderella and Blue Hubbard growing in piles beyond, but I figured while we're waiting for the grass to grow beneath the, or to die underneath the leaves, this would be a great place to grow some Space Hog varieties. I grew Kusha last year. They took over, and so I wasn't going to grow them this year, but again, it's bonus. Whatever happens in this space didn't cost me anything. So we'll hope for the best. This bed right here is a hospital bed of sorts. I had an area of lilies by the house that was about a 3-foot diameter circle, and it was a pain in the neck to mow around. And so I decided I was going to dig up the lilies and transplant them. And I was bowled over by how badly they needed to be separated, and I didn't have room for any of them. So I threw them in this bed. At the end, there's some irises with a similar story. I needed to clear them out of the area that I was going to be putting my herb garden in. They hadn't bloomed in years because they were so overcrowded with weeds and grass, and so I'm putting them here to see if I can nurse them back to health. As you can see, we have mulched these rows with shredded paper. It works great at keeping weeds down. This row right here is a perennial bed, basically stuff that I'm going to use eventually in the landscape, but I didn't know what to do with just yet. This yarrow right here is eventually going to be transplanted into my herb garden. There's some daisies and black-eyed Susans and echinacea and columbine. There's all sorts of things in here that will eventually have forever homes, and I will be able to use this bed for vegetables. Again, we have another row of potatoes. This is more traditional. They were planted in an actual bed of soil, and I mulched them with leaves once they started popping through. I don't know what kind of potatoes they are. They were seed potatoes from last year's garden that were too small to eat. And so I just planted them up. There's a mixture of white potatoes and red potatoes and purple potatoes. This bed right here, I actually planted really early. It was an experiment. March 18th, the tag says. I planted some lettuce, I planted some peas, I planted some kale and radishes, I planted some calendula, and as you can see, nothing is really thriving. It took forever for it to take off. The kale is actually looking decent right now. It just didn't do well because I planted so early. And I was expecting that, but I just wanted to see. This is only the 3rd year that I am growing in Zone 6A. Most of my gardening experience happened in Zone 8 when we were living in Virginia, and then I had 3 years of experience growing in Zone like 18,000 when we lived in Guam, and it was hot and gross. So I'm still learning about Zone 6A. This is a row of garlic we planted last fall. It's looking really great. The stuff in the middle that's so high is garlic from a local farmer that he has been, he's basically been cultivating this variety for several years, and it's very adapted to this area, and that explains why it's doing so well. This row right here is zinnias and sunflowers. I just transplanted them last week. Some of them did not make it. I think we have a slug problem, so I need to address that. But some of the sunflowers are doing okay. This right here is first row of tomatoes, and I'm growing a lot of tomatoes. I've got a lot of varieties, and so I figured I would take you down and show you what I'm growing and the experiments that I'm doing and what's going on with the tomatoes. So first up we have Abe Lincoln. I don't know much about this variety other than it got rave reviews on some internet site, and so I decided to plant him. This guy was the only one of the seedlings that I started that survived my inexpertise. So I hope he does well because I want to try the tomatoes. Then I've got 2 batter boys right here. And what I did, some of you are going to laugh at me, but Jess at Roots and Refuge says she plants an egg in every tomato hole. So I decided can't hurt, might help. So when I planted 2 varieties of the same tomato, The one closest to the house got an egg in the hole, and then the one farther away from the house didn't. And so here, can't really tell much of a difference. There are some tomatoes where you can tell a difference, and I will point those out. I've got 3 black crims here. They're doing very well. I grew them last year and didn't have a lot of luck, so I'm hoping to figure out this year if there's a secret to growing them, and then to get like a real taste of one. I've got 2 black Seamans here. Again, I don't know much about this variety other than I found somebody raving about it one day on the internet, and I decided to get some seeds and grow it. I've got 2 pink Brandywines and 2 Cherokee Purples. Some of these you might be able to tell. I just discovered a problem with flea beetles today, so you might see some holes in there. I've got some beans waiting to come up, some radishes, more kale, calendula, more kale. This is winter boar kale. That is dwarf Siberian. You will see volunteer sunflowers everywhere. I grew them last year, and like there's one right there, there's one right there, there's one right there. They're just everywhere, and I left them. Got some sugar snap peas, some lettuce, and then these are strike beans, which very spotty, so I might come in here. I need to weed, obviously, and then I will fill in with some new seeds because I have plenty of seeds. This row is cucumbers and zucchini and squash, and the occasional volunteer potato because I grew them here last year. Now you can see this potato definitely has signs of flea beetles. So for those of you who don't know, flea beetles, let me see if I can find one for you. Sometimes they hide. They're little black insects, and they jump. And they make these holes in the leaves. So I'll have to spray that one with some neem oil. So I don't know what this... I think this is a yellow squash. It replaced one that I had originally planted there that didn't do too well. I've got marigolds everywhere in between. That's a yellow squash. This is a Grazzini zucchini. Some nasturtium and another volunteer potato. This is an Italian striped zucchini. And this is a Cocozelle zucchini. Now here I want to show you an experiment. I planted 2 cucumbers, one here and one over there. And then to the right of them, I planted the same variety in seeds. And what happened was this one didn't make it. And yet the seed planted on the same day is doing fantastically. Over here, this one is obviously struggling. And the seed planted on the same day is doing just fine. So for those of you who insist on buying cucumber and zucchini starts from the store, buy yourself a pack of seeds instead. Those seeds will last more than 1 year, and you will get more bang for your buck. This is actually a Dyer's Coreopsis that I just planted. And then this lettuce, I planted it on the north side of the cucumbers, figuring it would appreciate some shade provided by the cucumbers. This lettuce all volunteered in the garden, and I transplanted it into a more convenient spot. As you can see, I have mulched with leaves. We have a lot of leaves on the property, and so in the fall we mow them, we bag them up, and then I use them in the spring to mulch the rows. This row of tomatoes actually just got put in this weekend. It was originally not supposed to be tomatoes, but I had so many that I needed someplace to put them. So this is an experiment row. With all of the tomatoes that you see with the sticks in the ground, those I will be single staking. These I am just going to let go. I know that the posts aren't going to be tall enough, But I figured I just wanted to see what happened. So I've got more of these varieties growing elsewhere in the garden, and I want to compare the productivity between varieties that have been single stemmed versus varieties that have just let them go. So I have a Jet Star here. I have two Super Fantastics here. This is a Purple Russian. And then I have two 1884s. I got these seeds, I don't even know where I got them from. I had them. They were absolutely the standouts in my seedlings this year. They look the same, you know, the same height and the same size, but it's because I buried these really, really deep. These grew really well for me from seed, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they taste and how they do, because they, like I said, they were the superstars of the seedlings. Here is a Dr. Wychees, or Witches, or I don't know how to say it, but Jess at Roots and Refuge spoke so highly of this variety that I had to try some in my own garden. And again, same thing with this variety. I've got two Paul Robesons, and that's all Jess's fault. She loves those tomatoes, so I decided to try them here. Now, for those of you who don't follow Jess at Roots and Refuge, she gardens in, I don't know if it's a zone 7 or a zone 8, way down south in, is it Arkansas or Alabama? It's one of those A ones. But very different climate than we have here. So it'll be interesting to see how the tomatoes do here versus down south. This is a German Johnson. I have a Costoluto Genovese and a Kopek Hayase. Again, I don't know where the seeds came from. I don't know anything about this tomato other than these seedlings did really well too. This is a black cherry tomato, which everyone raves about, so I wanted to try it. And then this is a Super Sweet 100, which was actually one of the varieties that I purchased simply because I wanted to have something to compare taste-wise to the black cherry. All right, another row of tomatoes. I've got two homesteads here. Now you will see that I have these little useless tomato cages around them. Do not buy these cages. They are not big enough for tomatoes. But the reason that I have them around this tomato is to remind me that this variety is a determinate variety and I should not prune it. I made the mistake last year. I got in a zone and I was just suckering all of the tomatoes, and then I realized that I had suckered some of my determinants, and that cost me about 80% of the productivity on those plants. So I put the tomato cages around the determinate varieties here to remind me that anything with a cage does not get suckered. I will, however, pinch off the branches that are close to the ground. I don't want anything touching the ground. Again, more you'll see in between. I transplanted some lettuce. I've got two varieties of hillbillies, two varieties of German Johnsons. I've got an early girl, and this one actually has a blossom. Now, I toyed with the idea of removing the blossom, but early girls are supposed to be early, so I'm letting that one go. Again, two more Dr. Wychees, that these will be single stemmed. And this is one example of an egg and no egg. These are both Costoluto Genovese, or however you say it. They were planted at the same time. This one got an egg and this one didn't. And I think that's one of the more obvious cases where the egg might be helping. It's definitely not hurting. This row is yet to be planted, so hopefully the next time I give a garden tour, we'll have something in there. I've got some lettuce and some cukes here on the trellis, and then another row of tomatoes because I was in desperate need of spacing for tomatoes. So I made this the saucing row, if you will. I've got two Amish pastes here. Martino's Roma here, and again with the cages around them because they are determinate, they don't get suckered. I've got 2 San Marzanos and 2 Juliets. And closing out the row, I have a Barry's Crazy Cherry Tomato. I made the mistake last year of growing 4 or 5 of those plants, and let me tell you, 1 is all you need because it is crazy the number of tomatoes that 1 plant will put out. All of these sunflowers were volunteers in other places in the garden, and so I put them in one spot. I have no idea what kind of sunflowers they are, but that's part of the fun of gardening. All right, another row of tomatoes. These 2 right here are some sort of Polish tomato. A gentleman in town gave me the seeds. He said he got them from somebody who brought the seeds straight over from Poland. So I don't know anything about them. I'm calling them Polish tomatoes. This one went in the ground about a week after that one did. So that's probably why there's such a big size difference. These are 2 Paul Robesons, 2 Moskvich tomatoes, which I've heard great things about, and 2 volunteer sunflowers. These are very early tomatoes, so I'm looking forward to trying those. I've got 2 Kellogg's Breakfast here, 2 more Kopek Hayesi, and 2 more Jet Stars, and another volunteer sunflower. I've got another row that doesn't have much in it. There's some dill and cilantro, and that's about it. More tomatoes. There are 2 Amish paste here. Actually 3, 4. Okay, so this is another paste row, apparently. I've got some Juliets here. I didn't have great luck with the Juliets last year, but I wanted to give them another chance. There's an Opelka. That's an Opelka. There was an Opelka here. It didn't make the transplant for some reason, so I replaced it with a Japanese black Trufel, which I've heard great things about. And then we have 2 more Romas, and all in here, this is all cilantro that volunteered from last year. The rule in my garden is, if you volunteer, you get to stay. This stuff is going to bolt pretty soon already. And another volunteer sunflower. This is the pepper row, and I don't have them all labeled, so I'm just going to do my best. This is the sweet pepper end down here. I didn't grow an awful lot of them because they don't do well for me. I have the varieties written down in my garden notebook, but I don't know what they are. I need to write tags and put them in so that I can identify them. These are Black Beauty eggplants. I had originally started seeds for like 4 or 5 different varieties of eggplants. They all got hit by aphids, except the Black Beauties for some reason. They are the only ones that lasted through my aphid infestation, so I'm hoping that they will do well. These are, I can tell by the color, these are Czech Black, which are very similar to jalapenos. Most of these are probably jalapenos. I put a lot of them in. And then the taller plants are cayenne peppers and more volunteer sunflowers. So, yep, jalapenos on this side and cayennes on that side. Over here, the final row, I transplanted some asparagus here because I didn't know what to do with it. And I've got one lone guy coming up. We'll see. Actually, there's another one right there. They may go live in my raspberry bed. I can't decide. All right, last row of tomatoes. We've got 2 Rutgers. We've got 2 super beef steaks. We've got 2 triple crops with a nasturtium and volunteer sunflowers. And we have 2 more 1884 tomatoes and 2 more Super Fantastics. And then the final row here is more garlic. And our latest project was we tilled this area using a little tiller, so it didn't go real deep, just enough to kill the grass. We put down the wood chips, and then I have 3 mulberry trees here that I have been growing in containers. They weren't doing real well. They've never flowered for me or produced berries, so I'm hoping now that they're in the ground, they'll be getting what they need. Back there you can see my beehives. I have 2 hives at the moment, and hoping to expand, but I need to figure out how to keep them alive through the winter first. I have kept bees in Virginia through hurricanes. I have kept bees in Guam through typhoons. I just can't seem to keep them through New England winter. But anyway, here is an overview of the garden. On June 1st. And so I don't know how often I will be doing these tours. Ideally, I would say weekly, but I know myself and that may not happen. So hopefully they will be regular. And I also hope to talk about problems and issues that I encounter in the garden. You will always see weeds. This is not a perfect garden by any stretch of the imagination, but I hope it's helpful to you. I know there are a lot of people this year who are growing vegetables for the first time, and so I hope you can take some tips and tricks and you are helped by the information here. The number one tip that I can give you right now is if you are in this area and you are growing tomatoes or potatoes, check for flea beetles, because this is the time. Another couple of weeks, it'll be Japanese beetles that come in, but right now it's the flea beetles. And your best bet for them, if you have them, is neem oil. It's approved for organic gardens, and it does the trick for chewing insects. All right, I think that's it for now. Happy gardening.